Good afternoon, and welcome to Curtain Call, our podcast all about theater, from the page to the stage, from the players to the playhouses. We want to enlighten you, inform you, and entertain you about everything relating to theater, broaden your cultural horizons. Today's topic is theater and the church. Now, you may be wondering, theater and the church, do they actually go together? Well, history has them together and opposed when it comes to Christianity. I don't know if we're going to get that deep into it, but we do have a pastor with us today. We have our guest, the Reverend Dr. B. Kevin Smalls, pastor of Hope United Methodist Church, my pastor. And he has some insights and some thoughts and some creativity when it comes to doing theater in the church. Um, my earliest remembrance and memories of, of the church was performing in the Sunday school programs. As at 3, 4, 5 years old, I remember one of the first things I learned was the 24 Psalms. Earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. And so that was my first opportunity at public speaking in front of an audience. And little did I know it, I probably got the bug that led me into theater at that point in time. I was a little fellow with a big voice, and people just heaped so much praise on me, I ate it up. So we're going to talk about theater. I know that there are people who out there who have probably gotten their start the same way I did in the church. We know singers got their start in the church, and a lot of them are doing theater now. Um, so if you're out there, you can go to WJZC. Anybody would like to make comments or ask questions, you can go to WJZZ Cool TV on Facebook and input your comments there, and I'll be able to see them, and we will be able to respond to them. So, Pastor, welcome to the show.
Thank you,
So
sir.
glad to have you. Um, to get your unique perspective on theater in the church.
Mm.
Hope Church has been kind of a pioneer with theater in the church. I remember, well, for those who don't know, in 1999, Hope United Methodist Church started a theater ministry. It was more like a community theater um, that was an outreach from the church that provided a service to the community, as well as evangelism ministry for the church. And we had a good run there for several years. But before we get into that, um, our pastor, give me some thoughts about some words about your thoughts on how theater and the church can be are related, how it can be used. Because I know a lot of people. I was doing some reading recently, and it talked about how the early Christians didn't approve of theater because of paganism,
Mm.
and even when I started doing theater in the church, I got a lot of feedback, uh, pushback,
Mm-hmm.
because they felt like theater didn't belong in the church.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen a lot of theater in the church
Mm-hmm.
since then.
Mm-hmm.
But give us some thoughts, some of your thoughts on how we can talk about theater in the church.
Well, I and thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here with you tonight. But I think theater is the retelling of human story,
Mm-hmm.
human life, human trial, human tribulation, human suffering, tragedy, joy, um, and as a result of that, the folks in the church are in theater all the time. You know,
Mm-hmm.
we're on the stage one way or the other all the time. It's interesting because the church has actually been very impacted by theater.
Mm-hmm.
Um, this is where we get ushers from. Ushering is not a church position, and that's not a holy position. That's a secular role. So you're going to be struggling to find the word usher in the Bible at all, right?
Right.
So what the church did was they developed some of its presentation based on theatrical presentation. There's a
Mm-hmm.
program or a bulletin, which is considered a playbill in the theater world.
Mm-hmm.
There's a flow that's in print of what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
There's a stage. In some cases, there's lighting.
Mm-hmm.
There's a performance element to it.
Mm-hmm.
So we would really be naive to suggest that there aren't any theatrical elements to the Christian experience. In the Black church specifically, um, the Black church was, the only place where people could go
Mm-hmm.
in the 1830s, 40s, 50s. They would break off,
Mm-hmm.
and Sunday evening they would, have preaching and singing, organizing, listening, planning. All of that was taking place in the early church, which is why church historically is all day long in some cases because it's a lot to do,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so over time, the role of the preacher has become a performance art of sorts.
Mm-hmm.
And the only voice, oftentimes, up until I would say the 70s or 80s, was that of the preacher. Preachers led reform, preachers raised issues, preachers led people to justice matters, because they occupied the stage in a way that no one else did.
Mm-hmm.
Today, it's different. Rappers occupy the stage as well. News reporters occupy the stage. So the occupation of voice, um, distribution is much wider than the church now.
Mm-hmm.
But the church has always had some levels of theatrical engagement to it. And in all honesty, black preaching is performance art. You know,
It
it's
is.
it's um, music wise, that's performance art.
Mm-hmm.
This Sunday past, we had a rendition of a poem by Harriet Tubman.
Mm-hmm.
So my thinking is, wherever you're able to tell the listener story,
Mm-hmm.
you're able to respond to it. It's where your credibility comes when you're able to portray the listener's experience in life. So that's kind of my initial thoughts on theater in the church.
That is, I had never really thought about it like that.
Mm,
Uh, Being a theater person, when you start speaking those things, those elements of the church, it's a natural relationship.
it is.
And I never really thought about it like that. We kind of had this argument in 1999.
Right.
That's amazing. This man, people, I could talk to you about any subject, politics, state of politics in America today, music. Uh, uh, the sermons are fantastic. We did a sermon a couple of weeks ago on the halftime show at the Super Bowl. That just made it plain for somebody at my age who just couldn't get it from listening to it. I went back and watched it again. We still didn't get it. But we did get the production design and the imagery of it. And a lot of that carries over the imagery and production design can be seen in the church. You've done some very interesting things over the past couple of years, and even a few years ago when we worked on the third service and did theater as a part of the third service,
Mhm,
where we constructed a series of vignettes
mhm.
and a sermon series. That was a beautiful thing. Uh, Tell us more about your leanings in that direction, because uh, it's very unique
Mhm,
and it's been very it's work. Uh,
mhm,
Not only as a form of delivering the word,
mhm,
but as a form of entertainment.
mhm.
You've taken some very popular subjects and just made them work from the pulpit stage to stage pulpit.
Mhm.
Uh, Talk a little bit about that.
Well, first, I feel that my job is to present the gospel where folk can get it.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish I was that good, right? Where my sermons and my preaching is enough.
Mm-hmm.
But we have so much, um, so many ways to offer messaging now through that, we don't have to be limited to just one genre or one aspect of delivery. So preaching is one thing for sure,
Mm-hmm.
but music is another. Um, Photography is another. Film is another. Visual art is another.
Mm-hmm.
Spoken word, storytelling. I just have the theory that church is a conversation, and the conversation is between the people and God.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to create ways to usher this conversation in so that some of everybody can get it. For some people, when you're preaching, they're with you the first 3 minutes and then they're out, um, but they'll remember a poetic piece, or they'll remember a song, or they'll remember a scene or a play, or so. I am enamored and fascinated with how to bring together art form,
Mm-hmm.
because I think God is the giver of all art, right? And how to bring together art form in a way that points to God. So that's the balance. Human experience
Mm-hmm.
and God's response to it.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why Thomas Dorsey got in trouble um, in the 20s and 30s. He was a blues musician. So
Mm-hmm.
we sing Precious Lord today like it's nothing.
Right.
But let me tell you, in the 30s and the 40s, they were not letting that song in their church
Mm-hmm.
because it sounded too bluesy.
Mm-hmm.
But he was talking about what? Human experience. Take my hand, lead me on, let me stand. He just lost his wife and his baby.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that was a traumatic experience. So he used his art form, which sounded too secular
Mm-hmm.
for the church at that time. So it wasn't until another 30, 40 years that people, when Mahalia came along,
Mm-hmm.
that people started to have a different connection with it. Kirk Franklin, the same way.
Same way.
When
Well,
he first came out,
Kurt Franklin, you say Mahalia, we go to Clint James Cleveland, and we go to Evan Hawkins with Oh Happy Day,
oh, happy,
and then all down the line, each generation of music.
it meets resistance,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, right,
And the resistance is usually around what people consider to be secular and sacred.
right. Sam
And
Cooke.
Kirk Franklin really pushed that button, you
Mm-hmm.
know. So it was years, pastors were not letting his music into their church.
Mm-hmm.
20 years later, then they come along, hey, everybody, we're singing Kirk Franklin.
Right.
But by then, you've lost the whole group of people, you've lost
Mm-hmm.
the whole audience.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the church has to be committed to doing what it takes to connect with people.
Mm-hmm.
So this Kendrick Lamar piece, for example, now he's more in line with my kids. I grew up with Tupac and Biggie.
Mm-hmm.
He spoke at a rapid pace.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't keep up with it necessarily, but I knew that he was a device for me
Mm-hmm.
to connect to that generation,
Mm-hmm.
because there's something they are saying
Mm-hmm.
that either we're going to listen to and make room to have conversation with,
Mm-hmm.
or we're going to shut them out, we're going to shut them down and not say anything. So I think the church has to move away from its fear of exploring various means to connect with people. And it's okay to always define what you're doing and why you're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So if the people are living it, if they're going through it, it's the church's business and
Mm-hmm.
it's God's business. And it's okay to be creative and innovative with how we address that conversation.
You're watching Curtain Call on WJZZ Cool TV live, coming to you streaming on Facebook, YouTube, X, and all other streaming platforms. Again, you're watching Curtain Call on WJZZ Cool TV live, the coolest TV station in the world. and we're talking about theater today and the church. And I am learning quite a bit here. I thought I knew a lot about theater and its relationship to the church just based on my little meager experiences. But it's always good to get a different perspective. And the perspective we're getting today is indeed not only enlightening, and enlightening and informative. There's a spiritual element to it. And when I say that, I mean as you sit here and listen to this discussion today, and you consider yourself a Christian, you've just been enlightened to the point where you can find a different way to hear the word, a different way to interpret the word, which is something that Pastor Small is very good at in terms of delivering the word, not just from the pulpit as a preacher, but creatively. Um, I was uh, so blown away by um, just the fact that that's where your head is, and that you were that type of preacher that just warmed my heart. And then to see the success of was it the Wiz
Mm.
and the Lion King. Talk to us
Mhm.
a little bit about those programs and uh,
Well, um, I had been living with maybe 4 or 5 years a vision of doing a worship adaptation of The Wiz
mm-hmm,
during the primary worship service. It's a lot easier to do at Hope now since we have one service. It
mm-hmm,
would have been almost impossible without two service set. But um, I came up with, I wanted to figure out how we could keep August worship active
mm-hmm,
and vital,
mm-hmm.
because we take a big dip in attendance in August.
You on the
And
job?
at all my years,
Yeah.
August is the lowest attending month.
Yeah.
So I looked at different aspects of the Wiz that included dance, that included singing,
Mm-hmm,
acting, and visual
mm-hmm,
components, and was able to put some of those pieces together over 5 Sundays.
mm-hmm,
And we would have a scene from the Wiz.
mm-hmm,
And that was a little easier because, the characters, Dorothy was lost.
mm-hmm,
The lion lacked courage.
mm-hmm.
Tin Man struggled with a heart, and um, what was the other one?
Courage, heart,
And
and
uh,
Dorothy wanted to go home.
the other, and I can't remember the. So it was Lion, Tin Man,
And scare and
and the
scarecrow.
Scarecrow.
Yeah,
The
scarecrow.
Scarecrow who lacked brains, right?
Right.
So those we focus on aspects of those each Sunday.
Mm-hmm,
And then we brought the Wiz in,
mm-hmm,
um, and I brought um, a friend of mine who has an extensive background in theater and is also a pastor, and I let him be the Wiz, invited him to be the Wiz and a
mm-hmm,
preacher for that day. So what we weren't prepared for was how well it was received.
mm-hmm.
So our attendance beat Easter Sunday attendance
Wow.
in August that year, and it was pretty much packed every single Sunday.
Mm-hmm,
And I also think it juvenated our in-person worship experience
mm-hmm,
because ever since the Wiz, our attendance has been on the up. So the second thing I wasn't prepared for was folks saying, "What's next?"
yeah, right.
I I hadn't thought that far.
Mm-hmm,
So Lion King, which was a lot harder to pull off because I hadn't seen the stage version,
mm-hmm,
um, and it was a lot of complex scenes, a lot of characters, a lot of puppetry.
mm-hmm,
So we had to be real creative with how to do the set designs and um, stuff like that. But even in Lion King, we explored relationships between God calling us to a particular ministry, what it means to connect with friends while we're down and out,
mm-hmm,
Simba's relationship with Timon and Pumbaa. So we've had we were able to explore some of those aspects that um, the thing we're considering gives us by way of resources.
Mm-hmm.
So the resources and the meat is always in the play. You
Mm-hmm.
just have to pull out what the theological connection is to it,
Mm-hmm.
So that's the work because it has to have theological integrity,
Mm-hmm.
it has to have biblical integrity. So we're just not entertaining people, but again, we're not just telling Simba's story, we're
Mm-hmm.
not just telling Dorothy's story, we're telling a listener's story,
Right.
right? And we're trying to utilize their experience, connect it with God's response.
Mm-hmm.
What does God do when we're out there in loss?
Mm-hmm.
And how does God make sense out of disaster and chaos? So that's basically what I'm thriving for.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in theatrical elements of worship.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, that's and then you did the Lion King. That was, like you said, that was much easier. I can't wait to see what you're gonna come up with next. uh,
Yeah.
when we did when we started the theater, uh, I was coming strictly from a theater background,
Mhm.
and we did we set it up where we did 3 plays a year, a season. We started in the fall,
Mhm.
and I wanted to do. I did what I did was I did a guest director, a guest playwright in the fall. Then we would do a classic, a black classic,
Mhm.
in
Mhm.
in February in the
Mhm.
winter, and one of my original plays in the spring.
Mhm.
We started with the meeting with Ruben Yubuka, who got the 10 shines, the meeting.
Is
Uh,
that with Martin and Malcolm?
Martin and Malcolm
Yeah.
conversation. Yes,
Yeah.
that was it was rich, and we end up having to uh, replace Martin maybe 24 hours before we open.
Oh my.
Yeah, yeah, we replaced Martin 24 hours before he opened. We did find a young man who came in and uh, spent that 24 hours getting ready and
Mhm.
delivered a major show. We had a good hit, good run. People came out and enjoyed it, and it was good. It was a blessing.
Mhm.
It was a blessing. Um, and I think over the years we did Amen Corner,
Mhm.
uh, uh, Checkmates, Ron
Mhm.
Milner's Checkmates, which he directed,
Mhm. Mhm.
Raising in the Sun,
Mhm.
and Fairly Victorious.
Mm.
And of course, all of my plays on one was Bringing the Word, the legacy of black preachers in Detroit,
Oh
that
wow.
we did for as a part of Detroit 300,
Mm.
which was I really would like to do that again.
Mhm.
And we did it on that little stage in Fellowship Hall. We
Mhm.
converted that to do what we were able to make that into a black box to create and do whatever we wanted to do in there. It,
Mhm.
what I did not uh, envision was the evangelism aspect of it. Um, we end up having people. We had a lot of people from other churches. In fact, churches would buy out dinner theaters
Okay.
on Sundays. We do dinner theaters on Sundays. Other churches would buy out the whole room
Mm.
as a fundraiser for themselves. Uh, and the other aspect of it that I became enlightened to is the fact that people who were coming in to see the plays would come back for the worship services.
Mhm. Mhm.
And
Mhm.
some people who participated in the plays
Mhm.
actually joined the church.
Mhm.
And so, can you speak to the evangelism of it from your perspective? Uh,
Well, I think that's the role of the preaching. The preaching has to interpret the play
mm-hmm,
for it to make sense,
mm-hmm,
and people will say, "Well, that's entertainment. We shouldn't entertain in church." But entertainment is the act of holding someone's attention. So,
mm-hmm,
so we should entertain in church.
mm-hmm,
We need to be interesting in a way where we invite people's imagination and reflection and introspection
mm-hmm,
into their worship experience. So the goal of preaching is to make sure somehow that people are able to experience God, experience God's love, God's mercy, sometimes God's judgment, God's response. That is what we do as preachers to usher in an experience of God. So it's interesting that we're talking about this because today we lost Roberta Flack,
We did,
right?
and I knew we could talk about it.
Right.
We lost Jerry Butler last week,
Jerry Butler
and that was
last
my
week.
favorite,
Yeah,
one of
my
my all-time
my
favorites.
frat
And I
brother,
saw
man.
when you saw Roberta Flack was one of your all-time favorites. She's one of mine as well.
Yeah, yeah.
But go with your
Well,
thought.
she has this killing me softly thing. That's what I'm also fascinated.
Mhm,
So she says that she hears that there's a young man who's a good musician, sings a nice song.
mhm,
So she just kind of goes to hear him,
mhm,
and she's sitting there listening to the man. And the more she's listening to him, she's getting caught up
mhm,
in the song. And she says, I began to wonder if he was reading my diaries out loud,
mhm.
he's
Imagery.
telling my whole life with his words. He's
Mhm,
killing me softly.
mhm,
And I think that's what has to happen in worship. We got to find a way again where we are connecting with what people are going through, what people are
mhm,
experiencing: grief, death, sadness, divorce, unemployment, breakup, moving to a new place,
mhm,
children unhinged, all of these relationship challenges,
mhm,
sadness, depression, all of these kinds of things we have to find a way to name. So you remember John 4, where Jesus is talking to the woman at the well.
mhm,
He asks her to go get your husband. And she says, I don't have a husband. He says, you're right. You don't have a husband. And the five you had, you've had five, and the one with you now is not your husband. Wow. He knew something about her story.
mhm,
And this is what enabled her to believe in him because he knew who she was.
mhm,
And sometimes when we disconnect people's anthropological experience or sociological journey, when we make a disconnection of that and we don't name it, we don't address it, we don't talk about it,
mhm,
then we lose them.
mhm,
But this woman says, after he says that, what does she say? I see that you are a prophet. And then she leaves and says, come see a man that did what? Told me everything about myself,
mhm,
told me everything.
mhm,
And people ought to leave church with the sense that God knows everything about me
mhm,
and still invites me, still appreciates, still loves me, still welcomes me,
mhm,
and still redeems me. So this is the work of worship teams and preaching. And when you ask about the evangelical
mhm,
component of it, and of course, the evangelistic aspect is not just getting somebody to join the church,
mhm.
but someone to develop a deeper relationship with God as well. So
Right.
I know I'm taking a long time to
No, no,
answer these
take all the
questions,
time. Yeah.
but,
we,
but but
yeah, take all the time. I mean,
yeah.
that's the richness of it, and the reason we're here today to talk about this subject because it's much deeper than one would think.
Mhm.
Like as soon as you started talking and describing the elements of the theater in church, I
Mhm.
mean, I had never thought about that.
Right,
I had
right,
never uh,
right.
thought about it in that from that aspect.
Hmm.
So I'm sure there are people out there who are watching who are being enlightened. I know there's some people who are trying to reach me. I can't see anything here from you, but I know that the audience out there that's wanting to communicate and talk about their experiences in the church. I know that I mentioned a little while ago. First, let me do the station break. You're watching Curtain Call on WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest TV station in the world, streaming live on YouTube, Facebook, X, and all other streaming platforms. Again, You're watching Curtain Call on WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest TV station in the world. Uh, I mentioned bringing the word, the legacy of black preachers in Detroit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And what we did is we focused on uh, three aspects. Um, the first black churches in Detroit,
Mm-hmm.
Second Baptist Church,
Mm-hmm.
St. Matthew's, and Bethlehem. I believe
Mm-hmm.
was the first thing we talked about W.C. Monroe and each one of those pastors.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
we had it set up where a young man was being called to the ministry, and he was resisting. He was
Mm.
really resisting being called. He wanted to be out playing in the club and having a good time, and he was resisting that call. Um, and we had each one of those preachers from that first generation of black churches in Detroit,
Mm-hmm.
and then from the next generation, the Great Migration,
Right.
and
Right.
then the generation of preachers who were current at the time. And we did songs and dance from
Mm-hmm.
each one of those periods
Mm-hmm.
with someone. We had the Father,
Mm-hmm.
we had the Son,
Mm-hmm.
and we had the Holy Ghost.
Oh, good. I see that.
We had all
You
three
had a
elements
Trinitarian framework for
right,
it.
right,
Okay.
right.
Okay.
And he eventually had to give in. Uh, One of the things that warmed my heart about that is someone actually said that play
Mm-hmm.
moved them into ministry. And
Wow.
we know the person. We know who that is, both of us.
Wow.
But she was moved to ministry from watching Bringing the Word. And so it's like you said a few minutes ago,
Mm-hmm.
you tell a person's story,
Right.
and they'll be moved by it.
Right.
I've had people move. We did a play called Grandma Rogers' Neighborhood, and a woman came out of the church and she was crying, and she was, I'm not, well, yeah, the church came out of the church, out of the theater crying,
Mm-hmm.
and she just couldn't stop crying. And we knew that something in that show moved her
Yeah.
through it, and she could relate to. And that's again the value of live theater,
Right.
being because it moves people
Right.
in the moment,
Right.
and that's what services do. Like this service Sunday, move the church to. Well, we like to call, but my son likes to call it church hype. I mean, you rock the house on Sunday.
Oh, wow.
So,
Thank you.
yeah, it moves people, and so there's a symbiotic relationship there between moving people,
Mm-hmm.
reaching them on an emotional level,
Right.
on a spiritual level, on a intellectual level.
Yep.
In fact, I joined the church because the preacher did reach me on an intellectual level where
Mm-hmm.
no one else had.
Mm-hmm.
And I think theater can do that as well.
Sure.
What other comments do you have about this? I wish we could get some of these comments from our audience.
I was looking to see if someone's sending me something.
Mhm.
Well, to continue, I think to support your point,
Mhm.
I think the gift of theater is also that it impacts different communities, different segments of population. We
Mhm.
saw this challenge with Tyler Perry's development, and some from the classic theater world
Mhm.
struggled because they thought that some of his work didn't stand up in terms of depth to the larger story. But what happened was he found um, a voice of people, and he addressed it.
Right.
What did he talk about? Domestic violence and the role of
Mhm.
grandma in the household.
Mhm.
A lot of comedy in it, a lot of family drama,
Mhm.
um, cheating. So so some of those issues he found a segment. But what he did is why I'm bringing him in
Mhm.
is he wrote out of to some degree his own experience, right?
Mhm.
And I think that's where the development comes from. Preaching, even theater, comes from some form of either disturbance or inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what disturbs you and what inspires you.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're able to capitalize that and to document that, you're ready to share it with the world.
Mm-hmm.
So some of the most moving experiences are when someone talks about their recovery from domestic violence or their recovery from immigration situations or how it
Mm-hmm.
was when they saw their father being taken away from them in handcuffs, never to be seen at least in another 5 or 6 or 7 years, or
Mm-hmm.
what it was like when they walked across the stage as the first in their family to receive a diploma. You know, this is I think everybody has the capacity to engage in um, telling the story in a way where people can receive it,
Mm-hmm.
be inspired by it, and do the work of transformation in their own lives.
Mm-hmm.
So anything that's popular or anything that's gone over well
Mm-hmm.
is because it made sense to somebody.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it made sense to a lot of people. You
Mm-hmm.
know, and I think again in the church world, that's got to be our job to really make sense to people in a way where they know that God is reaching them individually as well as reaching the church collectively. So that's just some of my theatrical kind of process, or my even my sermonic process. I use culture as a device. What's happening in the world? What are my people going through? So Kendrick Lamar was a
Mm-hmm.
no-brainer.
Mm-hmm.
133 million people watch that. You mean the
Mm-hmm.
church isn't going to say anything?
Right.
Or the church is not going to get in that conversation? Because, Brother Douglas, that's what it is. When you go to a museum,
Mm-hmm.
you're entering a conversation. When you go to an art museum, these artists are talking.
Mm-hmm.
They're wanting to convey a message visually. And it's up to us to find where our message is. That's why, as a preacher, I'm not big on giving people 3 points because I want you to find your own message in it. I don't want to,
Okay.
when you go to the movies, the
Mm-hmm.
movie doesn't tell you what you should take from it.
Right.
you
Right.
know,
Right.
so I'm not sure I, as a preacher, so I preach inductively. Now I know there are people who prefer a more deductive element. So there are times I give them 3 points,
Mm-hmm.
but I really want you to find what God is saying to you
Mm-hmm.
in the message. Um, so when I engage in my own process, that's what I try to think about. What is mattering to people right now?
Mm-hmm.
So this summer, um, or when we look at another theatrical presentation, right now there's a lot of political heat. Right? There's a lot of
Right.
political heat right
Right.
now. So what
A
kind
lot
of
of drama.
a lot of
A
drama?
lot of drama.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and a lot of pain
A lot of pain.
and disappointment.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you um, benefit from what the world is going through in such a way that you can present God's response to it? So and it's a number of things. Moses had justice challenges and getting people out of oppression into liberation. It's just a number of different ways that you can biblically explore what people are actually going through. So
Wow.
um, as a preacher, that's what I when I sit down
Mm-hmm.
or when I'm driving down the street, because art is everywhere. So if I'm driving down the street and there's a young boy helping an older woman across the street, that's a sermon.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm in CVS and the cashier and the customer are fighting and going at it,
Mm-hmm.
there's sermonic value in there somewhere. So
Mm-hmm.
sermons are everywhere, and if
Mm-hmm.
sermons are everywhere, so are ideas for theater.
Right. Hey, you took the words right out of my mouth. I process the writing plays is similar.
Yes, sir.
Coming up, I mean, you can see a play anywhere in your daily lives.
Hmm.
Yeah, one of the characters uh, from Grandma Rogers was this one-armed lady who walked around our neighborhood pushing a grocery cart around and just talking to herself. And all my childhood, we knew this lady. That was that. gave me a play.
Right.
You know,
Right. Right.
there's so many stories, and
Right.
right now there's so much disturbance and unrest and chaos going on,
Mm-hmm.
that you look for inspiration and you look for a savior, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
There are stories there,
Yep.
whether they turn out to be fiction or nonfiction. I mean, there's a movie that just came out this past weekend called Zero Day, I think it is,
Mm-hmm.
that almost speaks to what's going on now. But I was just reading that they didn't give a conclusion one way or the other
Okay.
how things that are going on now could be resolved.
Mm.
All we can do is speculate.
Mm.
There's those are stories to be told
Mm-hmm.
on the stage,
Mm-hmm.
on film,
Right.
and from the pulpit.
Right.
So, as a playwright, and all you other playwrights out there, um, I mean, life is going on. History is being made every day. We talk about this being February and Black History Month. Black history is happening today.
Yeah.
It's
Every
happening
day.
every single day. Black history is happening, and history speaks to us with lessons that work very well on the stage and work very well from the pulpit. Um, so there's speaking of church and the theater. I think we've given you some thoughts on how um, there is a relationship. Um, and I know I've learned some things about this relation, the parallels of theater
Yeah.
and the church.
Right.
And I, I'm laughing because I was thinking about all the pushback and
Mm-hmm.
uh, controversy and conflict that I went through trying to do theater at the church. And if there's anything that's good drama,
Right.
it's conflict.
Right.
You can't have good drama
Right.
without conflict.
Right.
And hopefully through inspiration um,
Yep.
and spirituality, that conflict is resolved. You rise to the conflict rises to a conclusion, to a climax,
Mm-hmm.
and then you get resolution. Um, and pretty much the church and theater has that in common.
Right.
Especially when you're delivering the word.
Right.
Let me give you one more station ID. You're
Okay.
watching Curtain Call on WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest TV station in the world. Streaming live on Facebook, X, formerly Twitter, YouTube, and all other streaming platforms. Curtain Call on WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest TV station in the world. Has anybody?
Yeah, I just got a message, a comment based on what we were saying
Mhm.
from California, all the way from California.
Okay, okay.
Dear friend who suggests that what we are experiencing will be in our grandchildren and great grandchildren's history books. To your point
Hmm.
of that, we're living through a major historical era,
Right, right.
which is plenty of fodder for theater,
Hmm.
And the Bible is nothing but theater. You
So much
crossing
drama.
the Red Sea,
Drama.
drama,
Yeah.
crossing the Red Sea, Moses raising the staff up and it
Hmm.
turns into a snake, and
Hmm.
feeding 5,000,
Hmm.
walking on water,
Right,
you know,
right.
uh,
Betray Judas is
Judas,
betrayal.
the trial scene
Mhm.
with Pontius Pilate
Mhm.
and Jesus and Barabbas. I mean, and of course the crucifixion,
Mhm. High
um,
drama.
high drama,
Mhm.
the ascension,
Mhm.
that post crucifixion series where the disciples are hiding, and
Mhm.
all of that. The Bible is a whole story of drama, and to define drama, it is the collection of people's human experience.
Mhm.
That's what I think. What do we do with that information? What do we learn from it? How are we inspired by it?
Mhm.
What did we learn not to do? It was drama with Abraham and Sarah
Mm-hmm.
and Hagar and
Right, right.
Ishmael. There's
Right.
David and
That drama's still playing out. We can talk about Gaza and Israel. And that drama's still playing out.
exactly.
Right. That
David
drama.
and Bathsheba.
Right.
You know, there's tons of stuff. Right, the birth of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
It's pure drama. You traveling all the way to Bethlehem on a donkey, and you don't even get a room for the
Mm-hmm.
Savior of the world to be born in.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I just got that message. The birth of Christ is pure drama. So absolutely,
Okay.
it's all around us. We live it,
Right.
we sleep it, we
Right.
walk it, we remember it,
Mm-hmm.
and why not display it and engage it
Right.
in the
Right.
context of the church?
Right. Right. I've learned a lot, and hopefully, audience out there, you've learned a lot. I wish we could have heard a lot more from you. 'Cause I know that there's a lot of thoughts um, given to what we've talked about today. Um, uh, I know that there are those of you out there who have done theater in the church, not just not just from the pulpit, but doing plays and that sort of things as well um, uh, in your churches. So hopefully today we've been able to equip you with some information that you can take back to your worship development team, to your trustee board or your deacon board, to encourage them to experiment, if not develop, theatrical programs that will benefit your church in terms of delivering the word, in terms of evangelism, in terms of serving the community. That's one aspect we didn't even get to talk about today. How the churches, in particular, the black church, uh, has always been a source of pretty much everything for our community. And when we did our theater at Hope United Methodist Church, it became a community theater, so it was an outlet, someplace people could go and get good, clean, wholesome entertainment um, for a reasonable price. So if you're considering it out there, I know I was expecting to hear from some people, Keisha, and other people who've done theater in the church. So be encouraged. Uh, Take this and run with it because there is a relationship between theater and the church. And we hope we've touched on enough subject matter today uh, that you become enlightened, informed, and hope to some degree that we were able to entertain you. So we hope to see you again on Curtain Call next week. And so please tune in. I'm not sure what our subject matter will be, but we will be here to talk about theater. So have a good evening. Thank you for joining us.